Hello, I am Marianne Mosesso, and I am a broker associate with Coldwell Banker in Duxbury, Mass., and also in Saco, Maine. And I'm joined with my co-hosts, Maryellen Boudreau and Chrissy Catanese, who are also broker associates in the Duxbury office.
Morning.
And as promised, we are going to do a podcast today on ADUs. And so if you don't know what an ADU is, it's an accessory dwelling unit. And in the industry, we're already getting questions about it from clients, customers. So we have a special guest with us today, Buz Artiano, and he has been building ADUs. And as we were kind of being introduced, I feel like I've been kind of behind the eight ball on this and not really knowing enough about it. And I just really heard about it in January and thought, well, we need to get ahead of this. And there's been a lot of mixed emotion about it. But scrolling through Facebook, started to see a lot of your posts about ADUs and tiny homes, financing, downsizing, which we already do downsizing workshops in the senior centers. So I just want to take a moment to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background, tell us what brought you up to being BuildX, because I know you've had some other businesses as well. And then after you do that, we're just going to pummel you with questions.
Okay. All right. Game on. So good morning. Buz Artiano, owner of BuildX. My history, I started as a residential framer in the early 80s. So I am going to date myself in this conversation. And in 1991, I started buying land and building homes for sale. And I've built about 800 houses and sold houses and condominiums, developed roads, subdivisions, done some affordable housing projects, a lot of different things. Simultaneously, since 1991, I was also doing insurance repair work, fire and water damage repair. I sold my first fire and water damage repair business in 2001. I had a 5-year non-compete. I started another company. It was called BuildX in 2007, and I sold that to a national company in 2021.
And we found out in our conversation last week that we had that he actually did my dad's place.
Oh,
Beck
yeah,
Off
that's
Flooding.
right. You said that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And found out that you've known my brother for 20-odd years.
Yeah.
So.
So in the course of all that work, I've right around $450 million worth of construction. So quite a few projects. And at the height of the BuildX days, we were doing between 300 and 500 jobs a year. So that was a pretty good-sized company. Started BuildX in 2022. Really didn't take our first jobs until 2023.
Tough years.
And originally was focusing on architect-driven construction, remodeling. Then by happenstance, I had a friend of mine, the Myettes in Plymouth. Pam is a lifelong friend of mine. She worked for me a long, long time ago. And she had to stop working because she had a child who had some disabilities when he was born, and she couldn't work anymore. Fast forward, Plymouth had been trying for 3 years to pass an accessory dwelling bylaw in the town of Plymouth, just for the town of Plymouth. And it finally passed. I think it was in May of last year. And so as soon as it passed, I called the town and said, how do we get a permit? Because they wanted to build one. It was interesting being the first permit. Everything took longer.
So did they come to you, this family?
They did, yeah. The
Okay.
Myettes had reached out to me 2 years prior even and said, how can we do this? Because, again, I'm not going to know the details, but essentially, in order to keep their son from becoming in a group home, this was an answer.
So you saw this coming down the pike as did you know that the state was going to pass this?
So I'd love to tell you that I'm super involved, was super idea about it. It was just happenstance that, between the Myettes, and then I started really researching and understanding it. And we had, again, first permit, learned a lot. The town of Plymouth had to go through council and decide how they were going to give the address, and it took a while to get the permit, but we did eventually get the permit and got it off the ground, and they moved in just before Christmas of last year, so 2024. So in that process, I had a lot of people calling saying, hey, what are you doing? And I, can we come see it? And I asked the Mayettes, I said, can I have some open houses? And they said, sure. We had 10 or 12 open houses, and we had 65 individual individual families come through, about 300 people. And during that process of talking to everybody and hearing the stories, it just really, I got excited about it and really started, decided to put a lot of weight behind it. And then Kevin Weldon, who's here today, he's my,
Yo, Kevin.
Yeah, shout out to Kevin, yeah. He's been a big driver of everything you see online comes from Kevin. So
Yeah, it's great content. It's actually, the videos are great.
Yeah.
So that's how we got to today.
Right.
Because
what we have found when we're, again, as realtors, obviously, we need to be educated about what this is.
Yep.
And we're getting the general questions like, can I put one on my lot? How big?
Yeah.
And we can say, oh, go to this website, blah,
Right.
blah, blah, when they're standing in the supermarket. We have basic information, but not enough for us to be able to say, oh, you can do this, do that, or let's make an appointment to talk about it.
Yeah.
But so we really, are hoping that you can kind of educate us about some of those things, that diving in a little bit deeper, and
even resources that people
resources,
will
yeah.
need.
But we feel like, and I don't, ladies, you can tell me your thoughts, is that it's been really mixed
Yeah.
response and reaction to it. And I guess I can see a little bit just because of high density, and all towns have always been like low density. They don't want any high density. But the whole purpose is for affordable housing. So I think people are missing that piece of it. But I know in our conversation last week, you said people aren't going to be doing these as an investor, flipping,
That's what the concern
getting
is.
tenants. That's
Yeah.
the concern. Are you? Is that your perception as well? Is that's what people are afraid of? Is high density, short-term rental?
so there's a lot to unpack there.
I know.
So,
yes.
Essentially, we'll back all the way up. So everything I'm about to say is based on what I know today in March of 2025.
Got it.
So, and lots of things are still changing, right? And in the way things are being interpreted, DEP, septic regulations, et cetera. So everybody needs to understand there is no one answer right now for
Yeah.
all these things.
Well, I don't mean to cut you off, but it's almost like, too, like not one size fits all.
Correct.
Like, that's where I think the confusion is. Like, well, why would, Quincy is way different than Marshfield, right? So I think that's where.
Yeah, it's valid concern. But to answer your question about people's concern, I don't see that because everyone that contacts me wants to build one. So
Okay.
I don't
That makes
see
sense.
I don't
All right.
see the argument on the other side of it. I think the argument is nobody likes change, but to your point. So from the 70s, from the 60s to the 70s, we encourage what I would consider sprawl zoning, big lots, acre and a half, 2 acre lots, 5 acre lots, 150, 200 feet of frontage, 300 feet of frontage, and we burned up a lot of land
Right.
and put in a lot of roads that now have to be maintained. And so now we're out of land,
Right.
right? So to my mind, it was poor planning from day one, with the thought that I'm sure there was some economic thoughts behind it, and not in my backyard, and all those things that go along with that, right? So that's a way bigger conversation than this. But the bottom line is the cost of construction today does not lend these units to be rentals. You're going to spend at least $200,000 to build something decent.
And I think that alone.
That
go
was
ahead.
yeah, that was what people were nervous about. Yeah. Yep. It's, they were going to become these like little Airbnbs everywhere.
Yeah, well, the law does state that you can't do short-term rentals. It has to be 30 days or
More. Yes. Yep.
Yeah, and the towns can make that a little more stringent. So, there are areas where if you're up by Quincy or in Boston, absolutely, it probably makes sense because the rents are much higher. And I'm sure you will see some people build them and then use them for 10 years and then rent them out. But I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think not everybody wants to be a homeowner. Not everybody is planning on being a homeowner. I was reading a statistic the other day that, the buyers, they call them sinks, single income, no kids. They're 30% of the market now. And in the United States, there's 20 million homes that are owned by single women and 15 million that are owned by single men. So there were actually, the latest stats say that there are more people with pets in their households than with children.
Yeah, I agree.
I believe that.
So
very true. Yeah.
I think the fears are unfounded, but I'm not dismissing someone's thought process.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've just seen a little bit of it, but again,
Right.
that's the purpose really of doing this is so
Yeah.
that we can,
Understood. Yeah.
diffuse that and talk to our clients and figure out if it's something that's
And
that's good
understand
for
it,
them.
where
and
it's so
understand
new.
it.
Yeah.
And this is just a side note, crazy story that I was just up in Maine, and a good friend of mine who lives down the street from where my house is, and I've known that she's had a little unit in the back, and she rented out to traveling nurses, which is what I do at my house as well. And so she was rehabbing it and adding a kitchen. And so I, kept, asking her, like, where you are in the process? Are you done yet? And she's like, oh, it's slow. But so I said, is it a second unit? Because in our area, in our neighborhood, we do have some multis. So I thought that maybe she just got it approved for a second unit. She said, no, it's an ADU. I'm like, what? I was so shocked because I had known that she's had this unit, and I said, oh my God, like, we're doing a podcast, like, what was involved? What did you do? And so it's Biddeford, which is just north of Kennebunk, and she said, oh no, on the City of Biddeford website, there's a whole section about ADUs. But the difference, I think, there, and I didn't have time to look to see when it even passed in Maine, or maybe it's just
No, it's
in
been
the city.
It's been a long time.
It's been a long time in
State
Maine?
of Maine, yeah.
Okay. So she said it was really just had to pay the money, pay the permit, pay the, or the
Yeah.
whatever other permits, electrical, plumbing, things like that. But so no, she just matter of factly said, no, it's an ADU. so for us, it's new here. So do you think Plymouth was the first one as far as before the state passed it?
No, so the Cape, I think there was, again, 15, I believe it was 15 towns on the Cape that had varying different, not uniform ADU bylaws, but they all had
By
some type
town?
of, yeah.
Yeah.
And then out in Western Mass, there was some areas as well.
Is that because there's just more land with each lot? Like the lots are bigger?
No, there's just a severe shortage of housing on the
Yeah.
Cape during the season, and they were trying to encourage people to build some seasonal housing for people because there's such a big influx of people. To give you an example on the Cape, there are times when there'll be a hotel that's on the water and one that's maybe not as desirable. The hotel owner of the one on the water will rent the entire hotel to put his workers in so that then they can run the big hotel that's on the water.
They do that in Maine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that just to show you the influx of people and the lack of housing for them. So there is a lot of what I would call seasonal,
Yeah.
rental on the Cape.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to pretend to know the market down there because I don't,
Yeah.
my cutoff is Falmouth.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that it's already kind of been happening, and then
Absolutely.
Then the
Yeah.
state,
Listen,
has kind of.
people need a place to live.
Yeah.
Right.
I know, and I don't know if I was telling you ladies that I had two ladies, friends that play pickleball with, and we might have talked about this last week too. Like I try to find them rentals, and
Rentals are
they
tough.
could not find anything.
Correct.
And so
It's
that's an
expensive.
option. So we've been taking our downsizing workshop on the road to the senior centers.
There you go.
And so this is just, we keep on adding pieces to
Yeah.
it, like, clean out companies and different things. So I feel like, ADUs
Yeah.
will be another thing to mention because one of the sections of the workshop is where you're going to go.
Yeah.
But so I'm not sure if it was you that we had this conversation where, mom has a big, beautiful home in Marshfield, and then the kids have a house in Abington, small ranch. So they sell their house in Abington, and then they buy mom's house in Marshfield, and then they build a small ADU for mom. And then the
Makes
Well, I
sense.
think a lot of people are trying to age in place.
Yeah. Agreed.
You know what I mean? Because some of these assisted living are really expensive.
Expensive. They're like $15,000 a
They're
month.
all expensive, not
Yeah.
some. They're all expensive. And additionally, not everybody wants to live in assisted living, right?
Right,
And maybe someday, at some point, unfortunately, you get there. But there's a lot of studies that say that people have a better quality of life when they're near their family.
Yeah, that makes
Yes.
sense.
So
Yeah.
Well, it's nice that it doesn't have to be separate. It can be attached.
yeah, it
But
can be
I think
both.
ideally
it can
for
be in the house. It can be
It can be a
added on.
basement and an attic, right?
Correct. Yeah, as long as there's proper egress for fire safety.
All right, so let's get into some of those questions.
If you're putting it in the house, and it's supposed to be half the size of the house, correct? So if it's, we'll say it's 1,000 square foot house, can the inside one still only be 500? Since it's already there?
So I'm going to read you what it says,
Okay.
and then you tell me.
Okay.
So this is straight from the.
Okay.
He came prepared.
It says, it. Again, I'm not going to read it word for word, but it says maintains a separate entrance, either
Okay.
directly from the outside or through an entry hall or corridor shared with the principal dwelling, sufficient to meet the requirement of the building code for safe egress. Okay. So in the building code, it says you have to have two means of egress. So there would have to be a door in and another way out, and those doors are supposed to be as remote as possible from each other. So you couldn't have just an attic, go up to an attic and be stuck up
Right.
there. There would have to be some type
Stairs or
of exterior,
something, yeah.
deck with a set of stairs down to the wall. And then it goes on to say, is not larger in gross floor area, and this is key. We're going to go back to that.
Okay.
What the definition of gross floor area. Half the gross floor area of the principal dwelling or 900 square feet, whichever is smaller. Okay? So to answer your question, if you have 1,000 square foot house and then you take a piece of it and make it 500 square foot ADU, you can. I don't, again, most of what I see is people that want it detached.
That's what I would think, yeah.
Yeah, it is a little bit more money, unless you have a really big house with a lot of area that you don't use, and I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
But generally, what I'm seeing is you have 1,500 to 2,500 square foot house, and they want to do a detached. And in my mind, the detached is it's just much a different experience for the person that's going to live in it. It's much more independent.
Yeah.
And you have
Absolutely.
windows all the way around
Yeah.
and no noise from people.
You're not living in the basement.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't want to poo-poo
No, I
that.
get- yeah, no, I
It's
totally understand
It's
that.
situational, but I think ideally you would want to do detached.
Independence.
Yeah, or attached with a separate entrance where you're not going back and forth in between unless you really want to do that.
What was the purpose of that separate entrance?
Fire, isn't it?
Yeah, I think a bunch of things. It's mainly just egress.
Okay.
But I think also to say this is a separate, accessory dwelling unit.
Now, do you build those on slabs?
So I would.
Or is it
So
different?
good question. So I would. There are times when you have to. So everything I'm saying is going to be black and white,
Yep.
right? But there are obviously gray areas in all these conversations. So I'm going to be just black and white for today. So I would never recommend anyone building on a slab if they can avoid it. Okay, there are times when you have to,
Yeah.
and there are things you can do to make it better. But ideally, it would either be crawl space
Crawl,
or some type of some space beneath.
Would that be dependent upon the topography of the lot? Or
A lot of things, water table,
Yeah.
Yeah.
et cetera. Now, the interesting thing that happened approximately 2 weeks ago. So originally, when the law was passed in February, you were essentially forced. There's a thing called HERS rating, Home Energy Rating System, right? And originally ADUs were under the same guidelines as new construction, and essentially July of last year, 2024, they increased the energy efficiency rating you had to, which is opposite. So the lower the number, the more energy efficient it is, but they decreased the number, which increased the efficiency. Okay. And ADUs were under the same guidelines as a single-family home. Approximately 2 weeks ago, that changed, and they've loosened up the energy regulations for the accessory dwelling units. So anything that's listed as an accessory dwelling unit can now go back essentially to the code before this one.
Okay.
And so now, and not to hit you with a lot of numbers, but this is very important along this slab conversation. So 3 weeks ago, if you call me and said, I have to do a slab, I said, boy, that's going to be tough because you can't heat the slab with radiant heat, okay, with some type of fossil fuel. However, now we can do a mixed fuel building with a HERS 52, which is easy to get to. Or if we do solar electric generation on the roof, we can go to 55. So big difference. So now gas, oil, propane, that's all back in the mix.
Okay, because I saw that you did a video on Facebook about having that it had to be electric.
And that
heat
was
well
true
through.
when I was saying it.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So that's what I'm saying. This is very fluid.
Yeah.
So we just had a meeting with our HERS rater.
Okay.
And we went through what it means, and I'm not going to pretend to be a HERS rater, but I know that we can now use mixed fuel, which is fantastic because I just looked at a job yesterday that it is a very 3-year-old detached garage, well built, that the woman wants to put an ADU in for her parents, and it has gas already to it, and
perfect.
and it only had a 100 amp sub panel. Which normally we wouldn't have enough electricity to run all the heat pumps and the stove and the dryer and all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
But now that we have the gas again, now the 100 amps is plenty because it's just lights, and they're all LED lights. So it's a game changer
For sure.
to answer your question. So now if you do need to do a slab, you insulate the slab with foam, you put some radiant heat in the slab, and you're nice and toasty warm.
Oh,
There
nice.
you go.
There you go.
Yeah, so that does make it. So that leads to some other questions that I know that as far as the tying in the utilities. So there would be in that situation, they would just be taking the gas from the existing house.
No, they already have a separate gas line to the garage's gas
Is
heater.
that required, or is it different for every? Like, can you tap into your main house?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so utilities is the biggest variable in this entire
Yeah,
process,
for sure.
and especially the septic.
So I was just
Yes.
going to say that.
The
Yeah.
septic is the wild card in all of this because 2 weeks ago the DEP held a seminar with all the engineers and all the Board of Health people locally, and all they did was publish some guidance. They didn't publish any rules.
Yeah.
And everybody had lots of questions, and they said, we don't have any answers. And
Well,
Okay.
It's a tough one.
so
So what were the guidelines? Not that you're going to go over all of them, but
I
like
think
what,
just generally you're going to need, again, this is town by town,
Yeah.
right? And I'm speaking in March of 2025,
okay.
right? So generally you have to have a separate septic tank from out of the ADU, you go into a septic tank and then go to whatever leaching field
Field.
that's been designed. So sometimes you can tap into the existing leaching field. Sometimes if it's been oversized, which a lot of towns, it's funny too. So just a side note. So over the years, and this is going to come back to bite a lot of people. So this is an important point. So for years and years and years, people replaced their septics under that Title V rule. You're going to sell your house, you got to put a new septic in if it doesn't pass Title V, which was a great program because it brought a lot of the septic
Cesspools.
got rid of all that bad stuff, right? The problem was there was an ability to ask for a variance to go within 3 feet of the water table instead of 4 on a repair, okay? And to keep them, if they had to do a mound, it kept the mound a foot lower. And everybody thought they were doing the right thing. The problem is now, if you want to hook into that with new construction, your ADU, you can't because
Doesn't
you
meet
have
the
to be
guideline.
4 feet above the water table.
Yeah.
So all those thousands and thousands and thousands of variances that were given out are going to come back to bite so many people.
Yeah. So I have had this question come up, and I had a property under contract in Kingston that, they ended up wanting to put the whole new septic system in the middle of the yard, and so that did not work well with her wanting to put in an ADU. So if they were putting in a brand new in this particular situation, so they had to put in a brand new septic system, and she wanted to put an ADU down the road, could she have just made that tank bigger to accommodate an ADU down the road?
That's what
She
I was
didn't
gonna
have to
ask.
put in a separate, or does she?
So
Or would she have?
whatever I'm going to tell you is wrong. Okay? but I'm going to tell you
And
my
it's March 2025.
yeah. So this is my best guess. So if you knew you were going to do an accessory dwelling unit, you wanted to future-proof it.
Yes.
You would definitely want to make sure that you're 4 feet above the water table.
Okay.
Okay. Don't go for a variance. Number
Got
one.
it.
Number two, you would do what's called a 2-compartment septic tank. Okay. And you would also make sure it's sized correctly. So if you have a 3-bedroom house and you think you want to do a 2-bedroom ADU, you would design it for 5 bedrooms.
Right. Okay. So that's and that's a new system going in. Do you think like new homes are going to foresee this and do that?
I don't know that you'll future-proof it that much, but I think people will make room for them.
Okay.
And I think there'll be, if you have a builder's package and you advertise that it'll fit an accessory dwelling unit, I think you'll attract a lot of buyers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you should plan ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the questions, Maryellen, I think you had about the HOA.
Yeah. Are you running into any problems with HOA?
He's already laughing.
So we just had one of these in Plymouth, and we had this conversation, and I don't believe that the HOA. So a couple of things. If it's an HOA and they're individually owned lots, so it's a single family lot that's not a condominium. In other words, it's a single family lot. But there is an HOA. I think there is some delay in that process, but I don't think they have any. I think at some point the Attorney General would get involved and they would get.
Yeah, they wouldn't. Yeah,
because it's very clear. It's very clear in this legislation that they can't stop you from doing it. They can put reasonable guidelines on it, like for instance,
covenants.
No, not covenants, but the town of Middleborough said no front yard ADUs. They can't be in the front yard.
I could see that.
I can see that.
Right,
Yeah,
so-
that makes sense.
Yeah, but I don't know if I agree with that, but it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
So, to answer your question about the HOA, I think there will be some interesting legal, work that has to be done.
Yeah.
But I am confident that the person wanting to build the ADU would prevail. I think it would be based on all the lawyers I've spoken to that have read this legislation. It's pretty clear you can't stop it
You
from
can't,
happening.
yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. Now, if it's condominium, shared lots, that's a whole different conversation because there's a possibility maybe the whole place can have one.
Yeah.
Okay, so who goes first and then everybody's out? I don't know. That's dicey.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that part of the conversation also that we had in the different towns, and I forget the specific situation we were talking about, but I think some towns are kind of scrambling and they want to pull back. And I know that, I'm not sure if you had told me this, or there was a Zoom call last week that the South Shore Board of Realtors did because they're getting calls, and so everybody's trying to find out the information as quick as possible, that towns can't then backtrack and make all these restrictive bylaws and rules about setbacks and
100%. So
lot size, minimum lot size.
It clearly states in the law, which anyone can look this up. Just go to the internet, look up 760 CMR 71-00, or just type in ADU.
Did you get that?
No, you can just type in accessory dwelling unit, Massachusetts. Their website comes right up.
Mass.gov.
You just scroll down about halfway down the page, and the final legislation comes out, and it does reference some other laws that are pertaining to this, because this, you got to remember, this is part of a fair housing package. This is not the only thing that's in that fair housing package.
Okay.
And I'm not going to pretend to tell you the rest of it because I've only focused on this.
Right.
But this was part of a bigger piece of legislation that was
Okay.
passed.
Okay.
And it clearly states in here that municipalities shall not enforce or prohibit regulation or unreasonable regulation that was imposed by the condition of approval of land use. So essentially, they certainly can have a say in it. I see a lot of towns are moving towards, they want to do site plan review. So you have to go do site plan review before you can, but all that has, so they can't just unilaterally do that. They have to go to town meeting. It has to be passed. And then I think a lot of people don't realize just because it passes at town meeting, it still has to go to the Attorney General's office, and they have to approve it.
So this is what we were talking about, that if they were trying to limit you, there were several instances that we were talking about that you didn't think that it would then pass after it got, if
Yeah.
the town said no,
Right.
and then went to, the attorney?
Attorney General.
Attorney
all
General.
all local bylaws and all those things, once they're passed the town meeting, they have to go be reviewed by the Attorney General.
Okay.
And so, again, none of this has happened yet, to my knowledge. I'm
Yeah.
sure maybe it has.
Okay.
I have a feeling the Attorney General is going to look at it and say, no, that's no good, that's no good, you can't do this, you can't do that. That's
To the
too-
town.
Yeah, that's too restrictive, go back, fix it, and then come back and see me.
Yeah.
So this be interesting, and I don't know this answer, so if it flunks at the AG's office, do they have to wait to the next town meeting to then fix the language and send it back? I think they do, but I don't know the right answer.
Okay.
If you put the ADU, say, in back of your house, do you have to have a driveway
It
to
said-
meet that?
No, it just says you have to have one additional parking space.
One additional, okay.
So it could be the common driveway has a, obviously you would want to make it as easy as possible.
Right.
But there are cases where you can't get a driveway to the front door of the ADU.
Gotcha.
But
But isn't that
ideally,
also within so many miles from a train?
yeah, you'd have to be really close to a train station not to have a parking space. I think it's a
Okay.
half mile. You have to be within a half mile of a
yeah,
train
right.
station.
Okay. So most
and you
everything
don't. I'm
qualifies.
honestly in our market here, and again, everything I'm talking about is pretty much Braintree to Falmouth, out, 24. That's my market that I concentrate on. So I'm not going to profess to know what's going on in Boston and beyond, but generally around here, this is a car-driven,
Yes, community.
place. Yeah, so you really need to have at least one parking spot,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Okay. All right, so we talked about the sewer and gas. So what about like electric?
Well, we still need to talk some more about septic.
Okay, let's do it.
So, the septic again is the biggest wild card. To give you an example, and these are just real world examples. These are not all inclusive. So we have one, and I'm not going to name towns because
Okay.
it's not relevant. So we have one in town A that was fighting tooth and nail, and eventually decided to let us do a deed restriction on the primary house to pick up one bedroom for the accessory dwelling unit.
Okay.
We have another town because over the years, a lot of towns had what they call minimum size septic field that were oversized. Is now actually working in this person's favor. So she didn't have to expand the leaching field. All we had to do was add a septic tank
Okay.
to the ADU and plug into the existing leaching field. So that's a big money saving and a big win. You also have some towns that will allow, years ago, the smallest you could go was a 2-bedroom septic. Some towns are now allowing you to do a 1-bedroom septic, so a
Oh.
tank and a 1-bedroom leaching field.
What size tank is that?
No, it's still
Interesting.
unfortunately still a 1,500 gallon
okay.
tank. But and then other towns are saying yes, you can just do a separate septic system. So lots of variability in there. I think, my advice to anyone that's hitting a roadblock when you hear the word no, I think it's a weak no. I think you have to maybe appeal to the DEP, and that some of this is going to be what I would consider a dogfight, and you just have to make up your mind that you're going to prevail. And I am confident that with the right team behind you, and it may cost you some money to do what you need to do, but I would encourage everybody not to give up.
Yeah.
Have you done any with town hookups? Or most
Town
of them?
sewer?
Yeah, town sewer.
We have one coming up that
Okay.
does have town sewer, and that seems very straightforward.
Okay. So what about a well?
Yep.
just gonna
Well,
ask that.
we did the first one in Plymouth was a well, and we tapped onto that well.
There's no other kind of restrictions of flow and capacity and things
No,
like
as
that
long
with
as
the water?
as long as the well is going to produce enough water for you, you should be fine. And then again, the septic is the driver of that, saying, okay, you have 5 bedrooms at 110 gallons a day per bedroom. So that's the driver of it. There is some other towns that have, again, I'm not going to name names.
Sure.
Because I have to go work in those towns later.
Right.
I don't blame you.
Yeah, there are some towns that have a quote-unquote water moratorium. But my question is, if I'm tapping into the main house's water, can you actually say there's a water moratorium? I don't think you can. So, again,
Dogfight.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to. I tell all of my customers this is fluid. You have to be patient. They will put up. Some towns will put up. Some are very easy. Plymouth is easy.
Yeah.
I mean, if you meet the regulations, it's all online. You do it, you send it in, you get your zoning permit first, then you apply for your building permit. It goes around to the sewer, septic, Board of Health, goes around to the water department if you're hooking up, and it's very straightforward. It's very professional. There's if there's wetlands, you have to do a wetland filing. It's just you follow the rules.
Follow the rules, like any new construction.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
any single
Yeah,
family.
and then
Yeah, right.
there are other towns that I would consider are very resistant to the idea, and you just have to make up your mind that it's going to be a little bit of a struggle, and don't get upset, and
Yeah. Yeah.
just keep on
Plugging
pushing.
away.
Yeah, and if you, and again, I'm speaking as if you have resources. If you don't have resources, then you might have to wait and let someone else go first to
and follow suit.
make the beachhead, right?
Yeah.
And then you can fall behind them.
Right.
Or if there's a town that's being very resistant, maybe you get on Facebook and find 4 or 5 people and you all work together.
To get it passed. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So what do you see getting into a little bit about what we had talked earlier about that towns are very nervous about high density, and definitely in Marshfield where we live and work, that down by the beach area, that it's going to be this high density. And I think from our conversation last week, as far as the rate of return, that somebody coming in and just making them into rentals, which in Maine, by the way, you have to, one of the occupants has to be the homeowner.
Living there.
So
That's
that's
the
not the
concern
case.
people have right
and that's
now.
not the case
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Does that go town by town, or is that state?
No, that's
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 state.
very
That's
clear in the
state.
legislation
Yeah.
that neither party has to be related and neither party has to be the owner
but
of the property.
but can each town change that, or no? That's
I don't think they'd get away with that.
okay.
Yeah.
So
I'm
that's
sure
so
there
that's
will-
set by the
I'm
state.
sure there was someone who will try.
Right.
And I think a lot of stuff is going to get kicked back by the Attorney General's office.
Okay.
They're going to be busy this spring after spring.
Oh, yeah, because it's a buzz thing. So what are the types of
It is a
people?
buzz thing. You're right.
Just gonna say,
I know.
I was like, that's a plug for him right there.
I did that just for you.
Thanks.
So who are the people coming to you to do this?
Yeah,
So
so-
and a general.
Yeah.
I feel like we're probably going to do a second podcast with you because there's just
There's
so
so
much
much.
information.
Yeah, and it's changing
we're-
all the time.
And it's changing all the time.
Right.
It's a fluid thing.
And
but-
I think at some point we do a few case studies.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I think
absolutely.
that would be interesting. Once we get a few more in the
Mm-hmm.
completion, we can talk about the trials and tribulations and what it took
Yes.
to get past.
Yeah.
And
That's going to be interesting.
so
Yeah, because I'm sure we're going to see that in
100%.
out in the fields.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
100%. So
we
in-
knew what your first one in Plymouth you told us about, but
Yeah.
what are some of the other?
Yeah, so
places?
from those open houses, again, we had 65 individual families come through,
Mm-hmm.
and they came in group. It was interesting. They came in groups from 2 to 10 people sometimes.
Wow.
The whole generation saying, "Hey, we're going to build this for my mom. We're going to do this. We're going to do that." So fascinating conversations. And then I would say that was most of the people. There were some people that were town meeting members that came just to see what they voted for.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and they were really happy. Mm-hmm. So
And I think people just on the onset have that like, oh, not in our town, and
Yeah.
they
Not in
want
my
to
backyard.
again, yeah.
But some people too aren't open to changes either. Like,
Yeah.
I think I personally think this could be a lot of positive for, like you said, home affordability. Like,
So
I can't put my mother or mother-in-law in a $15,000 a month.
100%. Yeah, in 3 years you'd already have your ADU paid
Yeah,
for. Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
and
I
then
get it.
and then the other issue is the number one thing that nobody in this room and no one in the world has is extra time, right? And so if your mom or dad or your brother or your sister or whoever it is, they live anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour away, and they need help,
Right.
it's a problem,
Yep.
okay? Let's be real, it's a
Yeah.
problem. And years ago, you would say, okay, Auntie Sue, let's find you a little ranch 2 houses down. It just went for sale. Let's buy that. We'll fix it up. You live there, and then I can walk to see you. That doesn't exist anymore.
Nope.
Yeah.
Okay?
Nope.
Or we're going to get you a little condo that's 5 minutes away,
Yeah.
Right.
No, it doesn't.
right? And so that dynamic is what's driving this. So again, I'm going to speak in generalities, but all of the stories were about we need to be closer together because the parent or parents are having health issues.
Declining.
They can't drive at night anymore, or we don't get to see them much anymore because we're busy going to soccer, we're doing this,
Yeah,
we're doing that.
everybody's working.
Yeah, we're all working, right? We're all, trying to stay ahead of the grind, right? And we don't get to see each other. So
It's true.
Yeah.
that's the driver.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the two scenarios, the most common are, one you said, the kids live here, the mom lives there, they're going to buy the family home. And then the reverse is they're going to sell the family home. And one of the multiple kids has said, yeah, I want, we're going to build the ADU, and they have to work that out. And I tell everyone that you need a builder that's going to do the whole job for you. There's a lot of clients I talk to that the builders are telling me, well, you go get the permit and then I'll build it.
Oh.
And I'm
So you do everything soup to nuts.
100%. That's
Well, most
I was like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. And some of them are telling people, well, you go put the foundation in and then we'll come and build it.
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I still haven't understood that one. But anyways, so you need a builder that knows how to adapt to these
Like a
regulations.
general contractor.
Yeah, but a builder that really understands the legislation and what needs to be done and what's involved. Even though it's a regular house, there are a lot of little nuances into building something that's small to make sure it's functional and works correctly for the person.
So you had already gone into kind of that architect piece, because BuildX wasn't just, you didn't get in, start BuildX just for ADUs.
No.
You had started it already as a...
Well, just to
Okay.
work with architects, but I mean,
Okay.
I've been designing and building houses for years and years
okay.
and years.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
think you mentioned to me that the average size isn't 900 square feet. It's more 750,
Yeah.
750-ish.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And usually single level.
Yeah. There have been a few people that have inquired about a second level, but part of this process, well, just let me finish that first part.
Yeah.
So you need a builder, number one, that understands how to help you get your permit and get it built. You need a state lawyer. Again, I'm going to speak about people that are families coming together with an older parents.
Yeah, makes sense.
Right? You need an estate attorney that's going to help you with that, and you need an elder law specialist, because you got to remember at some point they're not going to be able to live alone anymore, and they're going to have to go into some assisted living or something else. And the laws around that are changing, and the financial obligations and all that stuff. So there's some estate planning that can happen in the same realm as this whole bill.
In our downsizing workshop, we have a wonderful attorney.
Yep.
That
There you go.
comes and speaks to us.
Yeah,
about
so they need
that.
they need a team. It's just
Yes.
not about the
Yes.
build. There's, and then you need a mortgage broker. You also need a broker to sell the house. I tell every broker that I speak to, some in your phone right now is $20,000 to $150,000 worth of commissions. You need to get on the phone and call every past client you've ever had and say, have you heard about ADUs? Do you know about them? And I guarantee you about half of them are going to say, yes, we're talking about it now, because at some point they're going to have to dispose of one or more properties to make this work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've been
Need the
trying to
money.
give them what their options are. ADU has not been on our agenda
Right.
for adding to that, but we're certainly
I think
going
it's a
to
great
do that.
opportunity to call every client and say, have you heard about ADUs? We know a lot. We can help you.
Yeah.
Do you find it to build or prefab?
Yes.
So
Or tiny home.
Granny,
Yeah,
granny
pod.
pods. I just like the name.
Yeah.
it is catchy for sure. It's not fun though if you're a grandfather.
Okay. Okay, I get that. We'll have to change it.
Grampy pod?
Grampy pod. Yeah.
It doesn't sound as good.
Or grumpy pod.
Yeah. See, so I think when you get sub 400 square feet, it's a totally different conversation.
Yeah, okay.
It's a completely different house. The parameters are different. You can get things that are literally on wheels and drag them in the backyard and turn it into a tiny house
Interesting.
that could
Okay.
qualify as an ADU if you put it on. It didn't have to be like a full foundation, but maybe some helical piles. I'm not going to pretend to know
Yeah,
what to
okay.
tell you, but
Yeah.
for me, you need to be 500. Like the smallest I would recommend anyone go is 500 square feet. And it honestly doesn't cost much more to go to 600, because we still need a bathroom, we still need a
Right.
kitchen, we still need a heating system. We
You
still
need space.
Well, we just need the basic components,
Yeah.
and squeezing all those basics. there's like a minimum charge, if you will, to build one.
Yeah,
because
no,
you
totally
still have to
get
hook up
that.
the water, hook up the septic,
Sure.
hook the sewer, right? So it actually becomes more expensive in some cases the smaller you go, especially the cost per square
I've
foot.
heard that from other builders. Like that's
Yeah.
why they always throw the roof on, like go up instead of keeping it. It's,
Right.
They've already done all the work.
The
All the money's
footprint.
been put in the footprint. Yeah.
Yeah. So ideally, if you have the room, I recommend everybody do the most square footage they can
Yeah, that
afford
makes sense.
and fit, legally.
So I know
and
this is
remind me, we want to go back to that because that's a key little point
Okay.
about this square footage thing, because I think there's a big game changer that I'm going to tell you in a minute.
Okay.
Let's hear it.
You want to hear it now?
I do.
So this is a half-proven theory,
Okay.
okay? And I have the first half already proved. So if we go to the law, and not a lot of people have picked up on this, so we're sharing the secret sauce
Yay. All right.
with the world.
Love it.
Secrets.
Okay. So the definition in the law refers to gross floor area, not square footage. Everybody uses square footage, but it's not square footage. It's gross floor area.
Okay.
So normally, square footage, people would say, okay, you take the outside measurements of the foundation and you say the house is 20 by 30, it's 600 square feet.
Yep.
It's not, okay? It says the sum of all the areas of all stories of the building of compliant ceiling height, and that's key, we're going to go back to that, pursuant to the building code, including basements, lofts, and intermediate floor tiers measured from the interior face of the exterior wall.
Interior face of exterior wall.
Okay, so if
Okay.
it's a 20 by 30, okay,
Base.
space,
Exterior, yeah.
you're going to take off 6 inches all the way around, and that's your gross floor area if you have a 2 by 6 wall.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I mean, as realtors, way back in the day, we used to take room measurements
Uh-huh.
and put them online,
Yeah.
and they did away
But
with that
so
Well, it
all
became a
together because
liability.
of the controversy.
Someone always- yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
So on a 900 gross floor area ADU, the outside measurements are 974.
Yay. Well, so they gained
It
74
makes
square
it
feet.
makes a big difference.
Yeah. Okay.
Big
so
big
it-
difference. Now wait, it gets better.
Wait, Chrissy.
It
Sorry,
get-
my brain.
This gets better. However, so that's the definition of gross floor area. So now everyone's been saying, hey, what does my assessor card say? My assessor card says my house is 1,500 square feet. Okay? If you have a full basement and that basement is higher than 6'8" of your existing house, so let's pretend you have a cape, 1,500 square foot cape. Modern construction with a real foundation, right? And it's 6'8" or higher in the basement. Okay? I believe that you can now count the square footage of that basement towards the gross floor area of your existing dwelling, and now you have over 1,800 square feet, and now you can build a 900 square foot ADU. Because it says very clearly, is not larger than the gross floor area or half the gross floor area of the principal dwelling. And it clearly says in the definition, gross floor area includes the basement of compliant sealant height.
So it doesn't have to be a finished basement?
It just
No.
says basement.
Okay. Because I think when we were talking about basements, and I know, Chrissy was asking a little bit about that, I was thinking the square footage that they were questioning was whether the ADU had a basement, and that was included.
Well,
in
no,
part of
so
that.
so I think it does. So I think it does cut against you. I don't think you can have a full basement.
In an ADU.
A 900 square foot ADU, let's pretend you
what I
counted the basement at the Cape,
Yeah.
and then you built a 900 square foot ADU. I think you're on a crawl space in the ADU interpreted by this law directly. Or you have a 6'6" high crawl space or 6'7" crawl space.
Yeah. So it makes no sense to put really any kind of basement on the ADU, just to have the crawl space.
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
But for sure,
For the main house.
for the main house, if it's
Yeah.
if it's 6'8" or higher,
Yeah.
I think you can count that square footage to get your 900 square feet.
Oh, okay. And I think you would also mention, too, that you thought that maybe down the road that they would even increase that 900? Like if you have those big, huge homes that are 3,000.
Well, there are
4,000
towns
square
that already allow more.
feet. Okay.
Yeah, I think it goes town
Oh.
by town, doesn't it?
Yeah, so there are towns that already had ADU bylaws that were allowed to go bigger. So I would say that those laws still stand unless they say, no, we're just going to go by the state law. So, but again, this is all very town-specific,
Yes.
lot-specific. But
Yeah.
for me, this is very clear.
Yeah,
And I have it
that's a biggie.
50% proved right now. And so when we
Why
come,
only 50?
because I'm waiting for something to come back.
Okay. To see
So
if
I
it
was
gets
hoping I was
approved.
going to have it before today, so
Then
I
you'd
could
have
say.
a big announcement to make.
Yeah, I would actually. So we'll definitely have to do a recap on that.
Oh,
That
absolutely.
one actually is going to be a really good case study.
Yeah.
That
for
has
sure.
a lot of twists and turns in it.
And you're the one spearheading this. to
100%.
get it?
Yeah,
Okay.
I was just gonna
yeah.
ask
All
that.
right.
Yeah.
Well, then
I'm
you're
the
gonna be in
dog
the
in that
know.
fight.
Are you going
Okay.
in front of the legislation and everything else to help all these laws?
No, I would love to tell you that I'm doing that part, but I'm not. I'd love to be involved, but I'm just fighting every fight as its own little fight right now.
Gotcha.
And I'm using the tools that have been passed to say, this is how I read it. Tell me how I'm wrong.
Okay.
So the
for you.
interpretation. It's all
Yeah.
up to the interpretation.
Yeah,
of it.
but I can tell you just, I think I have 8 or 9 9 that are in permitting stage. I actually have 2 permits, so I have 7 in permitting stages. They're all different. Everyone has twists and turns.
Can we come see them?
I was
Yeah.
just going to ask you.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
wanna
so-
see them.
Can
yeah,
we have
so-
a field trip?
Oh, absolutely. So the next one that we have going is going to be at this one. I can tell it's going to be at 44 Bartlett Road in Plymouth, and we have the owners are very gracious, and they're really behind ADUs, and great story. It's a great family. The whole, and they've agreed to let us do open houses there. So
Oh, cool.
Oh, good.
yeah,
That's nice.
so when we get closer, we're gonna do a lot of open houses. We're gonna do.
So have you broke ground on that one, or still in permitting?
I think I'm gonna get my permit tomorrow.
Okay. Yay. Good.
And on
Good.
average, how long is the permitting process taking, or is it just individually?
Yeah,
each?
you got to plan on 45 to 60 days.
Okay.
Just because you got to work. If you had sewer, it would probably be like a month.
Yeah.
But you first again the process is okay. We know we want to build an accessory dwelling unit, and then we need to set a budget for what you want to build. But the variability in that budget is we don't know what's going to happen with the septic, the water, and the electricity. But the septic is the wild
Yeah.
card. In order to figure the septic out, now we need to hire a land surveyor, have them come survey. Then we need to do a perk test. Then we need to do a design. Then it has to go to the Board of Health, and we have to get it approved. And then we have to, So there's a lot. That's like 45 days of the 60.
Yeah.
Is that something for a pre-approval for money, right? To financing? Should you get the pre-approval before you even get into land surveys and all that? Say, this is my budget. This is how
100%.
high we can go.
Yeah, 100%. So so in the beginning, I was trying to figure out a way to say to people, this is how much your AD is going to cost. But I soon
Which was one question of.
yeah. So
Well, it's a
I-
tough
I-
one.
So I soon realized that would be impossible because of the variability of the site work.
Yeah.
So what I've done, and I'm in the process of doing right now, is we're going to have roughly 10 standardized models. Again, we can customize them for pricing purposes, and then they start with X1, the cottage, and that's a 900 square foot unit, and that will be priced. And essentially, we're pricing it on a crawl space, and essentially the price I can give you the price right away from the footings up.
Okay.
Okay, so from the footing up, this is exactly what this house is going to cost.
Okay.
Okay, now all the variables we still need to work out, but from years of experience, I can say I think it's going to be this, and the building permit's going to be approximately this much, and we're going to need to hire a land surveyor, and it's going to be this much. So to answer your question, we can put together a spreadsheet for that part. So we say, okay, X1, the cottage is X. And now we plug in all the other variables, and now that allows you to, and then with the plans, you can go to your mortgage person and say, I need to borrow this much money to build
Gotcha.
X1, the
Okay.
cottage, understanding that some of this is fluid. So,
So the septic would be a variable.
it's the massive variable.
Yeah. Okay.
So just the ADU
Yeah.
ballpark, like just the ADU.
Yeah, so-
900 square foot
Yeah.
from the foundation.
Yeah. So back. I want to answer your panelized question before I give you that answer. So we don't do modular construction. I have nothing against
Okay.
modular construction. There's a place for everybody in this
Sure.
dance. I've taken so having owned a fire and water damage repair business for many years, I've taken a lot of modular homes apart. I'm not in love with what I see.
Yeah.
Okay?
You're not the only one who said that.
Yeah. They're fine and they have their place. And if that's all you can afford, absolutely do it. Okay? And I would never talk down to anybody that has to do
Sure.
that. Right?
Yeah.
You know, my units are built on site, 9-foot ceilings, oversized windows, state-of-the-art electronics, state-of-the-art heating system, I wouldn't call them custom luxury, but they're not, bottom of the barrel. Right? It was something that I would be proud to live in or my family member to live in.
Not basic construction
Yeah, and
grade like we used to see.
Yeah, exactly. And good materials, proper siding, not the thinnest, cheapest vinyl siding, good siding, good roofing, good windows, things that are going to last a long time, right? So you don't have callbacks. It's a brand new house. You don't want to be working on your brand new
That's
house in
right.
5 years,
That's right.
right? So I want to set that baseline before I tell you some pricing. So
Yeah.
generally from the footing up, you're looking at about $250 to $275.
That's what I would have guessed.
Okay, so and then it can go up from there because if you say, hey, I want vaulted ceilings, I want 2 skylights, I want this, I want that, and we can do all that. That's the other reason why I like doing it not modular because I have tremendous flexibility. I pull out the CAD software, I use Chief Architect, and we do it in real time together, and we can look at it in 3D, and we can move windows, and we can put furniture in, and people can envision themselves living there, and we can do it by Zoom. Yeah, it is fun, and it's a very enjoyable part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think that that's helpful because I think in people's minds,
I'm a visual person,
they
so
think
that would help
tiny
me.
home, tiny price. You
Yeah,
know,
no,
but it doesn't cost a lot of money.
I don't.
That is still a tiny price
I'm
considering.
Sure, I'm sure.
Well, yes.
I'm sure there's
For
a
sure.
way to get, sub 200s on some type of platform. But that's not what we build.
Yeah.
If you want a quality product that's, affordable in my mind, that's going to stand the test of time. And I've built a lot of houses, so I know what, I go back and look at. I've actually gone back and, remodeled for people that wanted to add a family room or whatever. I actually just talked to a customer I built a house for in 1989. It was
nice.
before I was building and selling houses. I was building, semi-custom houses, and he called me up, the same owner, and
Yeah.
he called me up saying, my skylight finally failed.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, it's been 35 years, 36 years, whatever
I'd
it
be
is.
proud of that, actually.
I know, right?
That's
I'm
it? I forgot about that.
I think you got your money's worth. No, we were laughing. It was a good conversation, but but anyways, so I think you've got to plan on 350 with site work and everything.
Yeah, I mean, you can't go out and buy a small ranch. Like we
Well, no,
we have a
the
customer.
land alone is
Yeah.
$350.
So
We're trying to find her a small little place down in the beach area.
yeah,
It's nothing.
No, it's it's $1 million and up if you want to be by the water in any size property that isn't that's habitable. Let's put it that way.
Right. Yeah.
So
crazy.
it's fascinating to see, I've lived here my whole life. I grew up in Manamet down Center Road and, worked on a lot of buildings and, seeing the prices change and what's going on. And, I mean, real world stories. I mean, 3 years ago, just in the maybe it was almost 4 now, my oldest daughter, she got married and we said, we started looking at a house. I'm like, Alexandra, let's go build a house. Like we're just going to spend so much time fixing someone else's mess. At least let's do it our way. And she's a broker as well, and she's been around. We built a lot of subdivisions together. And so, long story short, I stumbled upon a lot in Kingston, and at the time it was $190,000. I'm like, oh my God, we're getting killed for this thing. And I said, well, we just got to buy it. There's nothing else. And thankfully we did because since that time, really nothing else has come on the market.
There's nothing.
Yeah.
And the things that are available are now $450 for a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yep.
So
Have you run into anything with flood areas?
yeah,
or-
that's a good question. So I'm actually building a house in Marshfield that is in the flood zone, but it's a single family home. It's not an ADU. So you could build in the flood zone as long as you get that first floor living area above the elevation.
And the pillars.
Yeah, it could be pillars. It could be raised foundation
Oh,
with
okay.
storm flaps. It's
Yeah.
a lot of
Okay.
different ways to get there. But I don't think there's anything preclude you from going up on pilings for an ADU.
I saw your sign out there.
Yeah. Oh, you did? Yeah, on Ocean
Ocean.
Street. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, oh, there he is. He's building regular houses, not just ADUs.
Yeah.
So this has
This
been
is great,
amazing.
yeah.
I appreciate it so much. I absolutely feel like would love to have you back because things are going to change, and then you're going to have new information for us. We're going to be out in the field. We're going to have new questions. So
Yeah. Again, encourage anyone to just go on our website, buildx.com. You can do the contact form, and from there we'll set you up a file. Everything we do is complimentary. We'll do a 15-minute phone call first with you to see if it makes sense to work
nice.
together.
Good.
You can ask us about us, and we'll ask about you and what you're trying to accomplish. And if we can help you, we'll be glad to. If we can't, we'll try to direct you someone who can.
Yeah.
There's things that we can't, we just don't do, and because the job's, not something. I'm not going to take a job just to take a job. I'm only going to take the jobs that I know that I can do a great job.
Sure. Yeah,
Right.
that
And
makes
then
sense.
from there, if you want to move forward, one of the next processes we do a virtual meeting with myself where we pull up some software where we can ensure that the ADU is going to fit on the property.
So zoning is.
Yeah, so that's the
big-
next step.
yeah.
So we use a product called Can I Build, and I can show you in real time with super hyperaptic, accurate GIS information with
Oh, that's good.
recent aerial flyovers, so we can lay the ADU on the property and we can talk about where it'll fit.
Oh, I like that.
And then from there, from that conversation, from there I can then send you a proposal right away saying this is what 800 square feet is going to cost, and here's the floor plan. And
I think that's such a
here's the
time
thing.
saver for people
100%. Yeah.
because
You can say yes
they
or no.
don't know what's my first step.
Yeah, your first step is, ADU, talk about the ADU, and then the next step is is it going to fit? And then the next thing is how much is it going to cost?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once you get those three things resolved, then we can talk about, okay, let's do a site visit, let's, go to the next step.
Yeah, and those are
Yeah.
the three questions that we're
Yeah.
gonna,
Well,
we're going to
100%.
get
100%.
all day.
A lot
Yeah,
of
yeah.
them too. Like I know if I did it, I have to cut down a bunch of trees. I could fit it, but I got a lot of site work that would have to be done
Yeah,
for
yeah.
it.
And
So,
again, that's the wild card in
Yeah.
this whole thing.
Well,
yeah,
and the
makes sense.
setbacks, I feel like setbacks are going to be a thing.
Yeah, so
in each town.
Rockland right now is 5 feet.
Yeah, so every town's different with their setbacks. Yeah.
Just for ADU.
Yeah.
The 5 feet radius.
Well, they're
Or-
treating it as an accessory unit, which sheds are 5 feet in Rockland.
Wow.
So now they are going to town meeting, and I'm sure that's going to change slightly. But if you're in Rockland and you're thinking about doing an ADU, I suggest you
Do
get
it
your
now.
permit in.
That makes total sense. Ladies, did you have any other questions that we didn't go over already?
No, I think
That's a
you
lot
hit
of
on
information.
everything.
Yeah.
I know, it is. A lot. That's why
Yeah,
there's
no,
so
this-
much more.
yeah, there
that
is.
I,
Yeah,
we
we
could
could-
talk for hours.
Yeah, 100%.
About this.
So glad to come back.
Yes, that'd be great.
I think by then we'll have a couple coming out of the ground, and we can do some case studies of what it took to get out of the ground, and the trials and tribulations, and what went on with permitting, and
Yes.
at that point we'll already have the building permit, so I can say the towns and
Yeah.
and
Oh,
we can
good.
talk about
good,
what-
the
Won't
bad,
have to
and the
bleep them
ugly.
out.
yeah. There has been some good and bad, and there has
Yeah.
been some ugly, and
Sure.
but
think
again,
it's
I
growing
just
pains for
yeah,
everybody.
it is. But again, people, there's tons of great builders out there, but you need to find someone that's going to be your advocate.
Yeah.
It's no different than going in the hospital. You can't help yourself,
Yeah.
right? You need
Yeah.
an
You need a good
advocate
team.
there. Yeah, you need somebody there saying, no, take the blood pressure again. No, they need a CAT scan.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
Good
So
analogy.
you need an advocate for your ADU that's saying, no, that's not right. No, we can do this. We can do that. What about this? What about that?
Yeah.
You can't. The rule of my company is the first 5 no's we start to believe it. After 13, we're pretty convinced it's a no.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's quite a few.
Yeah,
So that's good. So
That is
you're in the
good.
dogfight.
That's it.
Right?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for
Yeah,
you both
thank you.
for
That
coming.
was
It's
Yeah.
been
really
amazing,
good.
and
Yeah, good stuff.
we look forward to the next one.
All right. Have a great day.
Thank you.